I had only just moved into the building when the college girl who lived across the hall suddenly reported me to the police. She claimed that I was stalking her out of some sick obsession and secretly watching her while she showered. When the police knocked on my door, she was already there in the hallway, crying uncontrollably. With tears streaming down her face, she pointed straight at me and screamed, "Pervert! You've been spying on me every night with binoculars. You even posted pictures of me online." She kept shouting, saying she had seen me herself. According to her, the way I stared at her with those so-called disgusting eyes made her feel sick to her stomach. The commotion quickly drew the neighbors out of their apartments. People began whispering and pointing at me. Some of them even shoved me while hurling insults. A few of them shouted things like, "He's the scum of society." Others went even further, saying someone like me should be chemically castrated. One neighbor sneered that I looked like a perfectly normal man on the outside, but underneath I was nothing more than a filthy peeping Tom. Listening to all their accusations, I slowly reached up and took off the sunglasses covering my face. Underneath them were two deep, hollow eye sockets, completely empty. Then I spoke quietly. "Officer, can you explain something to me? How exactly is a blind man supposed to spy on anyone?" My voice wasn't loud at all, but the moment the words left my mouth, they cut through the noisy hallway like a sharp spike. The neighbors who had just been pushing and yelling at me suddenly froze where they stood. The middle-aged woman who had been the loudest of all still had her hand raised in the air, as if she had been about to hit me. She simply stood there, stunned, forgetting to lower it. Everyone in the hallway stared directly at my face. Or rather, they were staring at the two empty cavities where my eyes should have been. Those hollow sockets were permanent reminders of something that happened 3 years ago, when a fire took my sight. The officer leading the investigation looked like a seasoned cop. His name was Daniel. He paused briefly when he saw my face, but the hesitation lasted only a moment. Soon his brows tightened, and impatience crept into his voice. "Don't try to lie to us," he said. "Whether you're really blind or not, we'll find out soon enough at the hospital." Across the hall, the girl who accused me, Chloe Park, stopped crying for a second, but almost immediately she burst into even louder sobs. "He's lying," she shouted. "He's just pretending so he can get away with it. There's no way he can't see," she insisted. "Every night he stands by his window watching me. Those eyes, those eyes." She looked like she wanted to describe them, but when her gaze landed on my empty eye sockets, the words caught in her throat. Instead, she just pointed at me with a shaking hand, her whole body trembling. "Disgusting," she muttered. "This is absolutely disgusting." Her emotional outburst stirred the crowd again. "That's right," someone said from the back. "He must be faking it." "Criminals these days will do anything," another neighbor added. "He'd probably pretend to be blind just to avoid punishment." One young man stepped forward angrily and reached toward my collar. "You piece of trash," he snapped. "I'm going to teach you a lesson right now." Before he could touch me, a police officer stepped in front of him. "What do you think you're doing?" the officer barked. "Everyone back off. Let the police handle this." Then he turned toward me again. Even though I couldn't see his expression, the suspicion and disgust in his voice were impossible to miss. "You're coming with us," he said. I didn't resist. Instead, I calmly held out both of my hands. A moment later, cold metal cuffs snapped around my wrists. Two younger officers took positions on either side of me and began escorting me toward the elevator. Behind us, Chloe's crying blended with the angry shouting of the neighbors. "Scum of society. Get out of our community. Hope you rot in prison." I couldn't see their faces, but I could easily imagine the righteous anger written across them. And I could clearly hear the satisfaction in their voices as they tried to grind me into the dirt. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. Slowly, the metal doors slid shut, sealing off the noise from the hallway. One of the younger officers, he sounded new to the job, leaned closer and asked me quietly, Are you really blind?" I tugged slightly at the corner of my mouth, but didn't respond. The other officer gently patted his shoulder, silently telling him not to ask any more questions. Still, I already knew what they were thinking. In their minds, the balance had already tipped completely in Chloe's favor. After all, on one side stood a crying, beautiful college student who looked helpless and pitiful. On the other side was a suspicious man who lived alone and wore sunglasses indoors. From their perspective, it seemed perfectly obvious who the victim was, and who the criminal had to be. What they didn't realize was something simple. Sometimes, what people see with their eyes can be the biggest lie of all. And I, the blind man in this situation, had already noticed something none of them had. For example, when Chloe stood there accusing me earlier, her heartbeat had been steady the entire time. There wasn't even the slightest tremor of genuine fear or emotion. At the police station, I was taken into an interrogation room. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, filling the room with an unforgiving brightness. The air carried a faint smell of mildew. I sat down on a cold metal chair. Across the table from me were Officer Daniel and a female officer who was quietly writing notes. Name, Daniel said. Ethan. Age, 28. Occupation, unemployed. Daniel suddenly slammed his pen onto the table with a sharp crack. Ethan, he said sharply, I strongly suggest you start telling the truth. We already have witnesses and evidence, he continued. How long do you think you can keep lying? Facing in his direction, I asked calmly, what witnesses? What evidence? The witness is the victim, Chloe, he replied. As for the evidence, Daniel hesitated for a moment, as if realizing the explanation might not be so simple. We're still in the process of finding it, he said finally. Don't think staying silent will get you off the hook. His voice rose as he tried to pressure me. Chloe already told us everything, he continued. You moved into that apartment just a week ago, and since then you've been spying on her. Every night at 9 o'clock, when she takes a shower, you stand at your window across from hers with binoculars and watch her. You even took photos of her and uploaded them to foreign websites to make money. Your behavior constitutes a serious crime. He leaned forward. If you confess now, we might still be able to request leniency. I almost laughed. What an impressively detailed story. Time, location, method, motive. Everything had been carefully arranged. If I weren't the person being accused, I might have believed the whole thing myself. Daniel, I said, interrupting his long lecture. First, I don't own any binoculars. Second, I don't have the equipment necessary to commit this crime. My phone and computer were replaced 3 years ago with devices specially designed for blind users. They don't even have cameras. Then I slowed down and pronounced each word clearly. And third, most importantly, I am blind. Daniel's breathing became noticeably heavier. I already told you, he snapped. Don't use that as an excuse. Whether you're really blind or not, we're going to verify it with medical testing. Until those results come back, you remain our primary suspect. At that moment, the interrogation room door suddenly opened. A young officer leaned his head inside. Captain, he said, the victim is extremely emotional. She won't stop crying. She's threatening to report us to our superiors for protecting a criminal. Daniel's face darkened immediately. Understood, he said. He waved the officer away and then turned his attention back toward me. Even though I couldn't see his expression, I could clearly hear the grinding of his teeth. Ethan, he said through clenched teeth, do you have any idea how much pressure you're putting us under? She's a student at a top university, he continued. This case is already attracting a lot of public attention. If we don't handle it properly, the entire station will be blamed. At that moment, everything became clear to me. To him, the truth mattered far less than maintaining order. And the easiest way to maintain order was to make me confess. So in order to protect yourselves from criticism, I said coldly, you want me to admit to a crime I didn't commit? My tone clearly irritated him. What kind of attitude is that? Daniel snapped. Who do you think you are? Let me make something very clear, he continued. Once you're inside this room, you follow our rules. You refuse to talk? Fine. We have ways to make you. He stood up from his chair and towered over me. Then he gave a short order. Lock him up. Once we get the search warrant, Daniel said coldly, we're going to tear that apartment of yours apart. I refuse to believe we won't find something. The door opened again. 2 officers stepped inside and grabbed my arms, pulling me up from the chair. I didn't resist. At that point, I already understood something very clearly. From the moment Chloe reported me, I had walked straight into a trap that had been carefully prepared in advance. If they were bold enough to accuse me like this, then everything else must already be in place. Soon they would discover evidence inside my apartment. And once that happened, I would be permanently nailed to the pillar of shame. The heavy iron door slammed shut behind me with a hollow metallic echo. They had placed me in a temporary holding cell. The room was tiny, barely more than a concrete box. Inside, there was only a stiff metal bed and a small toilet in the corner. The air smelled strongly of disinfectant, mixed with something darker, something that felt like despair. I slowly felt my way across the room until my hand touched the edge of the bed, and I sat down. Then I listened. Footsteps echoed along the hallway outside. Now and then I could hear quiet conversations drifting through the corridor. That's the peeping pervert. He looks like such a normal guy, but apparently he's disgusting. I heard he's blind. Probably faking it. Who knows? Either way, his life is over. Of all people to target, he chose a college girl. Each whisper stabbed into my ears like tiny needles. I had long since gotten used to living in darkness. But in that moment, the darkness felt colder than ever. Sharper, too. About 2 hours later, the iron door creaked open again. Daniel walked inside. He sounded pleased with himself. In his hand, he carried a transparent evidence bag. "Ethan," he said proudly, waving it around in front of me. "Take a look at this." For a moment, he seemed to forget that I couldn't see. Then he answered his own question, his voice thick with satisfaction. "We found these under your windowsill. Military-grade binoculars." He rustled another plastic bag. "And this?" he said. Inside it was a digital camera. "We pulled this out too," he continued. "There are tons of photos of Chloe on it, from every possible angle." He paused, almost savoring the moment. "Completely disgusting. So tell me, Ethan," he said smugly. "What do you have to say for yourself now?" I said nothing. But inside my mind, thoughts were racing. They had moved fast. Faster than I expected. The evidence had already been planted. Seeing my silence, Daniel took it as a sign of guilt. He dragged a chair over and sat down in front of me. His voice softened into a patronizing tone, like a teacher lecturing a foolish student. Ethan, you're young," he continued. "You're not a bad-looking guy either. So why throw your life away doing something so sleazy?" He tapped the evidence bag on the table. "The proof is sitting right here. There's no point denying it." Then he pushed a document and an ink pad toward me. "Just sign the statement," he said. "Press your fingerprint here. If you cooperate, I might even ask the prosecutor to show some leniency. Maybe they'll shave a few years off your sentence." "Come on," he urged. "Let's finish this quickly. It'll be easier for everyone." I could hear the impatience in his voice. And the dismissal. To him, the truth didn't matter. He just wanted the case closed. Slowly, I raised my head in his direction. "Daniel," I asked calmly, "if I press my fingerprint, does that mean I'm admitting to all of the charges?" "Of course," he replied immediately. "And that means I'll be convicted of indecent assault and distributing obscene materials?" "That's right. With those charges combined, you're looking at a minimum of 3 years." I nodded slowly. "So my name, and my entire life, will be permanently marked? I'll be known forever as a rapist and a pervert?" Daniel's patience snapped. "Why are you asking so many questions?" he snapped. "You brought this on yourself. Who else is there to blame?" I suddenly laughed. The sound echoed strangely in the empty holding cell. "Yeah," I murmured quietly. "Who else is there to blame?" Then I reached forward, searching for the document with my hands. Daniel probably thought I had finally given up. Just as he expected me to press my fingerprint down, I suddenly grabbed the paper with both hands and tore it apart with all the strength I had. The ripping sound echoed sharply. Fragments of paper floated down like snow. Daniel froze in shock. He clearly hadn't expected that. You're insane," he shouted, jumping to his feet. He pointed a finger straight at my face and roared. "This counts as resisting law enforcement. You're only making things worse for yourself." I faced his anger without hesitation. Then I spoke slowly and clearly. "I didn't do it, and I won't admit to something I didn't do. You can fabricate evidence. You can even beat a confession out of me. But you will never make me bow. If you want a confession, you'll have to kill me first." My words hit him like a slap across the face. I could almost feel the heat of his fury in the air. His emotions shifted wildly, anger twisting into something darker. "Fine," he hissed. "Fine. Fine." He repeated the word 3 times, trembling with rage. "So you've got guts," he said coldly. "Let's see how tough you really are." He spun around and stormed toward the door, shouting into the hallway. "Someone get in here. Cuff him. File for formal detention. I'm going to teach him what the authority of the law really means." 2 officers rushed in. They yanked me off the bed roughly. Cold handcuffs snapped around my wrists again. This time they were even tighter than before, biting painfully into my skin. They shoved me forward as we walked, forcing me to stumble. And right then, my phone rang. The sound was unmistakable, the flat electronic tone used on phones designed specifically for blind users. One officer reached toward it impatiently, clearly intending to hang up. "Let me answer it," I said. My voice was calm, calmer than they expected. The officers hesitated. Daniel barked from behind them. "Answer what?" "Move him." Then I added quietly, "If this call delays you from discovering the truth, the consequences will be yours." That made Daniel pause. Suspicion crept into his voice. After a moment, he gestured for the officer to hand me the phone. I fumbled for the answer button. A cold female voice spoke immediately on the other end. "Ethan, this is your landlord. I'm giving you 3 days to move out of my apartment. I refuse to have a disgusting peeping Tom living in my property." "Understood," I said calmly. "I'll move." Then I hung up. My voice remained calm, almost disturbingly calm. Daniel stood there with his arms folded. I could practically hear the smug grin on his face. "See," he said mockingly, "even your landlord knows what kind of person you are. The entire world knows. You're finished, Ethan." He leaned closer to me. His breath smelled like stale coffee. "Just sign the confession," he whispered. "Save yourself the embarrassment of a trial where that poor girl has to describe your perverted behavior." I slowly turned my face toward him. I didn't have eyes to glare with, but the empty sockets seemed to unsettle him more than any stare ever could. "Daniel," I said quietly, "do you know why I answered that call?" "To get evicted?" he scoffed. "No," I replied. "To confirm the time." "The time?" he said. "Yes. It's 9 o'clock right now, isn't it?" Daniel checked his watch. "Yeah, so what?" I continued calmly. "Chloe claims that every night at exactly 9 o'clock, I stand by my window and watch her shower." "That's right," he said impatiently. "That's when you commit your sick acts." "Then explain something to me," I said. "If I've been sitting inside this interrogation room since 7 o'clock, how is it possible that my so-called military-grade binoculars are currently pointed at her bathroom window?" Daniel froze. The room fell silent. "What are you talking about?" he asked slowly. "My apartment," I said, "has smart home systems designed for blind residents. Everything is recorded. Door sensors, window sensors. If those binoculars were supposedly found under my windowsill, that means someone had to open the window to place them there." I leaned forward slightly, and the handcuffs clinked against the metal table. "My system logs every time a window is opened, along with the exact time it happened." Daniel's face went pale. He had just realized the trap he had stepped into. If those binoculars appeared after I was already in custody, and my window hadn't been opened for days before that, that means someone else placed them there. "That's circumstantial," Daniel stammered weakly. "Maybe you left them outside on the ledge days ago. In the rain we had yesterday?" I asked quietly. "Tell me something, Daniel," I said calmly. "Are those binoculars waterproof? Did you check them for water damage before you logged them as evidence? Or are they completely dry, which would suggest they were planted about an hour ago?" For a moment, no one spoke. Then I heard it, sweat forming on Daniel's forehead. His breathing grew uneven. His heart rate shot up. "Stop trying to confuse us," he suddenly roared, slamming his fist down on the table so hard it rattled. "Take him to the detention center. Now." The officers grabbed me again and dragged me away. But something important had happened. A seed of doubt had been planted. And even more importantly, I had bought myself some time. The detention center was an entirely different kind of hell. The smell hit me the moment I walked in. Unwashed bodies, stale air, hopelessness. My cellmate introduced himself as Old Henry. Apparently, he was a regular there, mostly small-time theft. "So what are you in for, blind man?" he asked, lazily chewing on a toothpick. "Peeping," I replied flatly. Henry burst out laughing so hard, he nearly rolled off his bunk. "You? Peeping?" he wheezed. "That's the funniest thing I've heard in 10 years. "Well," I said dryly, "glad I could entertain you." After a moment his laughter faded. Then his voice turned serious. "So who did you piss off? You don't get framed for peeping unless someone either really hates you or needs a scapegoat." "A college girl named Chloe Park," I said. Henry let out a low whistle. "College girls," he muttered. "Dangerous creatures. They cry a little, and suddenly every man in the world wants to be their knight in shining armor." I lay back on the hard bunk. The darkness around me was the same darkness I lived with every day. But my mind was racing. I thought about Chloe. Her voice. Her accusations. Why? We had never spoken before. I had only moved into that apartment a week earlier. So why accuse a blind man? Unless it wasn't really about me. Unless I had simply been convenient. The next morning, my lawyer finally showed up. Or more accurately, the public defender assigned to my case. Her name was Natalie. She sounded young, exhausted, and honestly, not very interested in helping. Okay, Ethan, she sighed, shuffling papers. The evidence doesn't look good. Binoculars, photos, witness testimony. The prosecutor is offering a plea deal. 2 years, suspended sentence, if you register as a sex offender. No, I said. Ethan, she replied impatiently. You need to face reality. You're blind. A jury might sympathize with you, or they might think you're a creep hiding behind your disability. Do you really want to risk 5 years in prison? Natalie, I said calmly, have you actually looked at the photos? What? The photos they claim were taken from my camera. Have you looked at them closely? I glanced at them, she admitted. They're explicit. Describe the angle, I said. She paused. Well, they seem to be taken from above, looking down into her bathroom. Exactly. My apartment is on the 3rd floor, I explained. Chloe lives on the 3rd floor across the atrium. Our windows are level with each other. So if the photos are taken from a high angle looking down, the camera would have to be on the 4th or 5th floor. Silence filled the line. I could hear Natalie frantically shuffling papers. Oh my God, she whispered. Exactly, I said calmly. And there's one more thing. I'm blind, Natalie. But I'm not stupid. Before the fire, I worked as a software engineer. My phone for the blind isn't just a phone. It runs a background audio recorder 24 hours a day. It's a safety app one-coded myself. You recorded everything? She asked. Everything. From the moment the police knocked on my door. Chloe's screaming. Daniel's threats. Even the exact time when my landlord called me. Natalie's voice changed completely. The exhaustion was gone. Now she sounded sharp, focused, excited. Ethan, she said quickly, we need to get you out on bail. Immediately. The bail hearing took place 3 days later. Natalie presented the inconsistencies in the case. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Bennett, examined the photos carefully. Then she looked at the floor plans of the apartment complex. Finally, she adjusted her glasses and addressed the prosecutor. Mr. Prosecutor, she said slowly, unless the defendant possesses the ability to levitate, these photos could not possibly have been taken from his apartment. The prosecutor, a slick man named Victor, suddenly sounded nervous. Your Honor, he said quickly, the defendant could have used a selfie stick. Or perhaps a drone. A blind man flying a drone to spy on his neighbor? Judge Bennett raised one eyebrow. After a pause, she spoke. Bail is granted. $5,000. A short time later, I walked out of the courthouse. Technically, I was a free man. For now. But the court of public opinion had already convicted me. As I stepped down the courthouse stairs, something smashed against my shoulder. A rotten egg. Pervert. Monster. Reporters rushed toward me, shoving microphones in my direction. Ethan, did you do it? How do you feel about ruining a young woman's life? I silently put my sunglasses back on and kept walking. Natalie guided me toward her car. Ignore them, she said. We've got work to do. We drove straight back to my apartment. The place had been torn apart during the police search. My Braille books were scattered across the floor. Furniture had been overturned. But one thing remained untouched. My server. It was hidden inside a false compartment in the bottom of my closet, quietly cooled by a silent fan. Natalie, I said, connect a monitor to the server. I'll guide you. It took about an hour. I typed commands by touch while my screen reader rapidly rattled off lines of code. The speed made Natalie dizzy. What exactly are we looking for? She asked. The logs, I said. And the network traffic. Network traffic? My router is powerful, I explained. It can detect nearby devices. Not their data, just the connection handshakes. The MAC addresses. I pulled up the log from the night I was accused of spying. Here, I said. I pointed to a line of text that my screen reader highlighted. At exactly 8 p.m. The time Chloe claims I was watching her, a device connected to my Wi-Fi network. Your phone? Natalie asked. No. The device name is camera_connect_x. That's a Wi-Fi SD card. The kind used in professional cameras to upload photos instantly. So, she said slowly, So that device wasn't inside my apartment, I replied. The signal strength was minus 85 dBm. That's weak. It came from outside. Probably the hallway or the apartment above. Natalie went quiet. Wait, she said slowly. You're saying someone uploaded the photos using your Wi-Fi from nearby? Exactly. To frame me. They cracked my password, which isn't difficult when they know I'm blind and can't easily monitor intrusions. They used my internet connection to upload the photos to those foreign websites. Natalie leaned closer to the screen. So who did it? I gave a grim smile. That's what we're about to find out. Natalie scrolled through the list of devices detected in range at that time. She began reading them aloud. Unknown iPhone. Samsung Galaxy. Chloe's MacBook Air. Wait, I said. Chloe's MacBook Air. Yes. It was connected to her own Wi-Fi network, Natalie explained. But your router still picked up its beacon signal. Check the signal strength history, I said. She tapped the keyboard. It's usually around minus 90 dBm, she said. That makes sense. Her apartment is across the hall. But wait. At 9:05 p.m. that night, the signal suddenly jumped to minus 40. That's very close, I said quietly. Extremely close, she agreed. Like, right outside your door. I leaned back slowly in my chair. So while she claimed she was in the shower, being watched by me, her laptop was sitting right outside my door. Why? Natalie asked. To confirm the upload, I said. Or to plant the digital trail. We finally had our first real lead. But it wasn't enough. Someone had helped her. A college girl doesn't pull off a setup this complicated on her own. She needed someone with access. Someone who could plant the binoculars. Someone who could take those high-angle photos. Natalie, I said. Who lives in the apartment directly above Chloe? I don't know. I can check the tenant records, Natalie said. She picked up her phone and made a quick call. 5 minutes later, she hung up. Her voice sounded shaken. You're not going to believe this. Try me, I replied. The apartment directly above Chloe's, Unit 517, is rented to a man named Daniel R. Carter. I sat very still. Officer Daniel? I asked quietly. Yes. The same man who arrested you, she said. The same one who found the evidence. The realization hit like a wrecking ball. Every loose piece suddenly slammed into place. The trial began 2 weeks later. By then, the media frenzy had exploded. Every news site ran the same headline. The Blind Peeper Trial. Chloe was the first witness called to the stand. She wore a modest white dress and styled herself to look fragile and frightened. And she cried exactly when she needed to. It was horrible, she sobbed to the jury. I felt like someone was watching me all the time. Then one night, I saw the flash of a lens and him, standing there in the darkness. Objection, Natalie said calmly. The witness claims she saw the defendant in the dark. How exactly did she identify him? He had his window open, Chloe stammered. The streetlights lit up his face. But the defendant wears sunglasses even indoors, Natalie replied. Did he remove them while peeping? Yes, no, I saw his face. The prosecutor, Victor, quickly interrupted before she could contradict herself further. Chloe, he said smoothly, tell the jury about the photos. He posted them online, she said dramatically. My friend found them. I was so humiliated. I wanted to die. The jury looked at me with open disgust. I remained still, sitting quietly with my hands folded on the table. Then it was our turn. Natalie stood up. I call Officer Daniel Carter to the stand. Daniel walked up confidently. His chest was puffed out, and his uniform looked perfectly pressed. As he passed me, I could feel the hostility radiating from him. Officer Carter, Natalie began. You were the arresting officer, correct? Yes. And you were the one who discovered the binoculars and the camera? Yes. Under his windowsill. Officer Carter, Natalie continued calmly. Where do you live? Daniel blinked. Objection, the prosecutor shouted. Relevance. It goes directly to credibility and motive, Your Honor, Natalie replied. Judge Bennett considered it briefly. Overruled. Answer the question. Daniel shifted in his seat. I live in the city. Be more specific, Natalie said. Do you live at the Sunset Arms Apartments? A pause. Yes. Unit 402? The courtroom fell completely silent. Daniel's voice tightened. I occasionally rent a place there. It's close to the station. And is it true, Natalie continued, that Unit 517 is directly above the victim's apartment? I suppose so. I don't exactly study the floor plans. Natalie then projected a slide onto the courtroom screen. Officer Carter, she said, this is a log from my client's router. Can you explain why a device labeled W_Carter_iPhone connected to the defendant's Wi-Fi network at 9 p.m. on the night of the incident? Daniel froze. I was investigating the area, he stammered. Before the crime had even been reported? Natalie asked. The emergency call from Chloe Park didn't arrive until 9:20 p.m. So why were you already investigating my client's Wi-Fi 15 minutes earlier? Daniel turned toward the prosecutor, clearly searching for help. But Victor had gone silent. He was staring down at his notes. He knew the case was collapsing. Natalie continued relentlessly. One more question, Officer Carter. Can you explain why there are Venmo transfers totaling $5,000 from your account to Chloe Park over the last 3 months? The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed her gavel. Order. Order. Suddenly, Chloe jumped up from the witness stand. He forced me, she screamed. He said he'd evict me if I didn't help him. Daniel exploded to his feet. You lying little brat. We planned it together. You wanted the settlement money. Enough. Judge Bennett thundered. Bailiff, take them both into custody. I'm declaring a mistrial. And I am ordering an immediate investigation into Officer Carter and MS. Park for conspiracy, perjury, and filing a false report. I sat quietly while the courtroom dissolved into chaos. People shouting. The judge's gavel pounding. Officers rushing around. And for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. A real smile. The aftermath came quickly. Daniel was fired from the police force and charged with corruption, fabricating evidence, and distributing illicit recordings. It turned out he had been secretly filming people from his balcony for years. He sold the voyeur footage online. But when neighbors started getting suspicious about flashes coming from his apartment, he needed someone to blame. I was the perfect scapegoat. The blind loner who lived alone. Chloe eventually broke down and confessed everything. She had been struggling financially. Daniel, who was both her landlord and her secret boyfriend, had promised to waive her rent and give her a share of the settlement money they planned to extort from me. In the end, I was completely cleared of all charges. But the story didn't end there. I sued the police department. I sued the apartment complex. I sued several media outlets that had publicly labeled me a pervert. The settlement was enormous. Millions. I used part of it to buy a house on the coast. A smart home designed specifically for accessibility. No neighbors. No accusations. Just the sound of the ocean. About a year later, I was sitting on my porch one evening, listening to the waves crash against the shore. My phone rang. Hello, Ethan. The voice on the other end stopped me cold. I hadn't heard it in 4 years. Not since the fire. Adrian, I asked. Adrian had been my business partner. He was also the man who had been standing next to me when the lab exploded. The man who ran away and left me burning. I saw the news, Adrian said awkwardly. Looks like you're rich again. I am, I replied. Look, Ethan, about the fire. I panicked. I never meant to leave you behind. I know, I said calmly. There was a pause. Actually, he continued, I was thinking maybe we could work together again. I've got a new startup idea. Artificial intelligence tools for the visually impaired. It would be perfect for you. I listened carefully to his breathing. Fast. Nervous. Greedy. Adrian, I said quietly. Do you remember what I told you right before the explosion? I don't really remember. Everything was chaos. I told you the safety systems had been bypassed. Manually. The line went silent. I checked the logs, Adrian. Even though I'm blind, I see everything now. I know you disabled the sprinkler system. I know you overrode the temperature safeguards. You wanted the insurance payout for the failed prototype. Ethan, that's ridiculous. I have the evidence, I interrupted. It's stored on the same server that exposed Daniel. I just haven't released it yet. What? His voice trembled. What do you want? I don't want your money, I said, leaning back in my chair. I already have enough. Then what do you want? I want you to confess. Publicly. Just like Chloe. Just like Daniel. And if I refuse, he asked weakly, then I send the logs to the FBI. Attempted murder. Insurance fraud. Arson. Ethan, please. I have a family now. So did I said softly. Before you burned my face and left me in the dark. Then I hung up. I already knew what would happen next. Men like Adrian, men like Daniel. They were cowards. Exposure terrified them more than prison ever could. I took a slow sip of wine. The ocean breeze brushed gently across my scarred skin. They had called me blind. They thought the darkness had made me weak. They were wrong. The darkness is where I learned how to truly see. And now, I was watching all of them. The end.